This is a call to order for the August 29th Canal Winchester City Council Committee of the Whole. Roll call, please.
Ms. Amick?
Present.
Ms. Amos?
Here.
Mr. Busker?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Milliken?
Here.
Mr. Shea? Mr. Walker?
Here.
Need a motion to excuse Mr. Shea?
So moved. Second.
Motion was made by Mr. Walker, second by Mr. Clark. Roll call.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes. Also in attendance, Mayor Ebert and Finance Director Amanda Jackson. First item on the agenda this evening is the funding proposal for the Canal Winchester Chamber of Commerce that was presented to us at our last council meeting. There is somewhat of a tie-in to our next item, but I don't know who wants to take the floor first. I'll open it up.
This is just a quick question. During the presentation at the last council meeting, Ms. Kristen Ankrum spoke kind of impromptu for Denise Mathias, who was not able to be with us, and there were a number of questions that were posed to her that she was not prepared to answer because, again, she was sort of not expecting to have to speak. So I hope that, they'll still have an opportunity to answer those questions because I think there were a number of them.
Were they invited tonight? I mean, were they supposed to be here, or did they know this was up?
Forth, so I don't know. I don't know if did they know about this by chance?
I doubt it. I mean, it was news to me when they came up and spoke at the last meeting, so.
Same here. Okay, well, I guess if nobody has a problem, I'll start it off then. I've reread the proposal. I'm completely transparent in saying I'm wondering if we're opening a can of worms. But I've talked to a couple other cities. Pickerington was one of the ones I talked to. I actually just talked with them today. And they said most of them, actually, so far all of the ones I've talked to said they were not funded by their city whatsoever. The part I struggle with, the chamber serves a purpose, and it's a great purpose. But the part I struggle with is they mentioned they haven't raised their fees in a long time. We have a large number of new companies moving in that would qualify for your more higher rate Chamber of Commerce members. So usually they're determined by the number of employees. That's how they determine some of the rates in the other cities. That could potentially be some of your larger, we've just built quite a few industrial buildings that could be helping fund some of this. The other thing I struggle with is so they haven't raised their prices in a while. They haven't done many fundraisers to show that they're trying on their end to raise these funds as well. So I guess I just don't see the commitment from them. It seemed like this was we're not sure what to do, so let's just ask for money. And that may not be the case. But one of the suggestions that I did receive from when I talked to Pickerington's chamber was the city over there is a high-level sponsor. So they make a $10,000 donation to the chamber every year to be this sponsor, to be a large sponsor.
I'm sorry, who does that?
The city.
Okay.
So they're not, at this point, apparently there was a small falling out between the two. So they're down to like 5,000. But I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to sponsor, to be a member, and maybe we already are, so maybe Ms. Jackson or the mayor can answer that.
I do believe we are. I'll have to look. I will check.
Thank you. And I'm wondering if they have the same levels, and I'm sure it's different for every group, but from all the groups that I did talk to, a lot of it was based on the number of employees they had, and so that's how they based their membership. I know a lot of our downtown businesses are not involved in this, and I know they're going to be trying to seek that. I'm concerned we're opening a can of worms, but I also just worry that I don't see where they did the beforehand trying to find this money.
I think that, I agree with you, that for them not to do the fundraising is an opportunity for improvement, but not raising the rates, I can understand why they wouldn't want to do that, and they may be scared to chase any more off what they already have. So I agree with you, I don't think that we should be opening that can of worms, so to speak. I've made it known my opinion, I think that I would not be in favor of this proposal, but I would like to see some bed tax money go their way, just to see what they do with it, and if nothing comes of that, we can always take them out of the bed tax.
I think their goals and outcomes, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, I think they acknowledge that they have some shortcomings. And, and Jill, to your point, they talk about increasing their membership and increasing their events and all of that. So again, I think they're acknowledging that they have some shortcomings as an organization, and they have specific outcomes to try to achieve improvement.
And I do know that we give them money for they do a 5K. I think they do two fundraisers, I think is what I read. And the one 5K, we do give them $2,000 from the bed tax grant to pay for. So a good chunk of what we give them covers their expenses. I do not personally have a problem with doing a sponsorship or making a larger sponsorship, but I don't know that I'm on board with paying for a position right out of the bat.
Does anybody else feel different than what's been mentioned? And does it seem like there's much support for this proposal currently?
So what is and Amanda, this is probably, I'm sorry, Ms. Jackson, this is probably a question for you. If we were to allocate 10%, it's 10% of the 248,000, or what is the number? What would 10% of X be?
So that all depends on how we go about doing this. So the draft ordinance that is in your packets this evening would actually have to be adopted by council before it would go into effect. So that $240,000 number that you're referring to would change by the time that goes into effect. Your other option is to do what you did with Labor Day, and that is just ask to allocate it, to budget for it. I would prepare the legislation and we could do it, next week at your next meeting. So you have several options how you want to go about doing that if you do want to give them money right away. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit of a process so that you can pass that ordinance and get that into effect.
I thought it was, my understanding, it would be 10% of what the annual, whatever, how it's all divvied up in
Collections.
4,000 different
Right.
ways, right, between destination and some other, and how all that does, that it would be the annual.
I think we could do it either way.
Not the,
Right.
yeah,
Well, the 10% of the 247 is way greater than 10% of our annual.
oh, no
Yeah.
doubt.
I mean.
That's why,
So
yeah.
city council
Right.
receives, and I'm firing off the hip, so tell me if I'm completely wrong. 120,000 is approximate for a year, half of that goes
Yeah.
to destination, so we're at about 60, so you're talking 6,000. Did I do my math right?
And that's all going to vary depending on,
Right.
how much bed tax we take in.
Yeah. So I'm not sure, I mean, when they come at they're coming in at 60, and please don't misunderstand, I see the value in the chamber, I'm just concerned of that we set another precedence. But I'm not sure that 6,000 will be beneficial enough for them to, do we give them do we do a large sponsorship in the hopes that it will buy them some time to get to where they need to be in their membership? Just an alternative thought.
Yeah, I'm curious, because in their goals and outcomes, it has one of their outcomes being the creation of diverse income streams and decrease reliance on city funding. So I'm wondering exactly what that plan looks like. It looks like they've got some ideas and some action items that they'd like to try. So, but I don't know over what period of time. Would that be within the 3 years they would do that? I'm not really sure exactly how they would approach that.
So can we segue into bed tax then, and then come back to this? Is anybody opposed to that?
No, I think that's probably a good
Yeah.
idea.
Okay.
Mrs. Amos, if I could real fast, I just want to go back to the example you used about how much money council would have and how that would be divvied up. So the way that the draft ordinance was written, let's say we took in $100,000 in the bed tax fund. 50 of that goes to destination, 50 goes into council's pot. The draft ordinance right now has $25,000 of that 50 set aside for your bed tax grant program, leaving you only with $25,000 to divvy out. So in that example, the chamber would only, 10% of 25,000 would only get $2,500. Does that make sense? So don't forget that the bed tax grant program, if you choose to continue that, is included in that money as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I did not process that through correctly. So, bed tax. Right now, we have a lot of money sitting in the account, and Amanda, thank you. That chart that you made up is phenomenal, by the way. It really kind of established the trend. So I think part of it, first, for me, I would like to see us spend down part of our bed tax, but how do we do that? How do we do it responsibly? This shouldn't be a savings account for council. It should be something that we're putting back into the city. So a
But it
couple
doesn't
things.
ever hurt to have a little rainy day fund for
Oh,
some
I'm not opposed
things.
to that either.
Yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
want to
it-
spend it all down here when we've got things coming up.
I agree. Well,
It
and,
might-
you know, an example, JRD wouldn't have been
They-
able to stay afloat had we not had a rainy day fund, so
Right.
super thankful. But can businesses apply for the bed tax grant for events?
Not the way that it is currently written, no.
Because that was one of my thoughts, is our businesses do a lot of events that bring in people to our town. Your shop hops, when you have the, like, Harvest Moon is doing their emergency responders thing. So some of our businesses, is that something that maybe we open our bed tax grant to next year? Do we expand the amount of the bed tax so there's a small portion for businesses and a small portion for non-exempt? I mean, just a thought, because they're bringing in business too, which is what the bed tax grant's for. So they're bringing in people from outside and.
Kind of a blanket statement to that, Jill, is that, you know, and I'm not 100% positive about the process just yet, but one of the things that I was impressed about with the chamber's proposal, and I'm not trying to beat that dead horse, but is that they had a plan of how they were going to spend the money. And I kind of feel like whoever is requesting dollars from the bed tax, or we're allocating, that there needs to be a plan for how they're going to spend that money. And so would our local businesses be able to come up with a specific plan about how they're going to use those dollars? And they probably would, but if we asked them to.
And I was thinking more along like the $2,000 mark, like the others, or not anywhere close to this, but yes, I agree. I mean, they'd have to come up with a plan of what event they're using it for and how they would be using it.
Yeah.
And then, like the businesses and the organizations that get it, they're supposed to be turning in receipts to Ms. Jackson so that they can qualify again for the next year. I know that she said that some don't,
Most do.
most do.
There's an occasional straggler.
I might have missed this, you might have said this, but it's nonprofit right now. Where does that come from? Is that from our charter, or is that from our rules, or?
So we rewrote the application in 2018, 19, and rewrote the application to make it a little bit more defined, but that was something that council wrote the rules on.
And put nonprofits are the only, I mean, ever since I've been on council, it's always been nonprofits are the only ones that are eligible to apply. This is news to me, of
Yeah, this
talking
was
businesses.
Mike,
I don't,
and maybe we don't see that, but I'm just trying to think of ways that our community is bringing people in, because a bed tax grant should be used a lot, a majority of it should be used to increase your flow
yeah,
of traffic.
yeah, I don't disagree with that, and that's why I was concerned of
I'm looking
the
for-
applications that were coming in. A lot of them didn't have that component in, or much. And I thought, you know, something like McGill Park and things like that, I think are gonna, when it's complete, are gonna bring a lot more people in than
Oh, I'd love to see
A
those
lot of
garage
some
doors go
other-
on McGill Park thing right now. with the-
Some other things, yeah, other things that,
Throwing that out. I think it was 2019 that we changed these. It was myself,
It was 2018.
18. thank
Yes.
you. It was myself and Mike Coleman and I think Will.
I think that's right. I mean, that's council's grant program. You can do with it what you would like.
okay.
I think, personally, I think regardless of what the ask is, whether if it's 5,000 or 50,000, I think what you really got to think of is what value do they bring to City Canal Winchester? Are they a value to City Council? Are they a value to the businesses downtown? That's the most important thing, I think. And if the answer is no value, then it's pretty easy answer. If they bring value to the city, then I think you got to figure out what value is that and how much is it?
That
Are
was
they
one of
worth
the,
it?
that's very similar to what one of the other chambers said to me. They said, is it project driven? Does it achieve something for the city and for the chamber? Is there a project specific that you're trying to gear to so that it's beneficial to both? And I couldn't answer that straight out, but I thought that was an interesting way for them to present it to me.
So back to,
Back to bed tax.
well, I've got a couple things here.
Okay.
Well, first being, wanting to spend the money down. I understand the desire to do that. Who knows what kind of, if there's a pet project that comes along or it's something that we might want to do or that money would be valuable. I'm okay with spending a little bit, but I don't want to spend all of it. But Ms. Jackson, I was trying to find a reference point back to when the most recent time we started discussing the bed tax. And on our May 16th meeting of this year, it was under old and new business. The actual bed tax allocation ordinance was put in the agenda. And that was just a draft ordinance. You remember what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So where did that draft come from and what were the intentions of that? Because I think that's, when I spoke to you before the meeting started, that's where that came from, I think, because it says in there the CWICC and things like that.
So council has been discussing the bed tax money for several years now.
Yes.
And internally, we put together a starting point for your discussion. That's what that draft was. What we thought a good use of the funds would be, but again, this is up to you. We wanted to assist you with some place to start.
Okay, because that, okay, so if everybody wants to look that up, like I said, it's on the, what'd I say, May 16th? Is that work session account? It's the work session, May 16th agenda, under old and new business, is the draft ordinance that I'm looking at. And so that was kind of my framework for this discussion, was trying to nail down some of those percentages and how we wanted to allocate those funds so we don't continue to build up that balance so it gets astronomical as we all anticipate that it probably would.
Hope it will.
Yeah. So if you referred back to my email that I sent you all on kind of my personal breakdown, that's kind of where I was hoping this conversation would go. And I included in there 10% to the Chamber of Commerce. I also, Mayor had mentioned during that meeting, I think it was, planning for the bicentennial. I would like to see 15% go to the bicentennial, and we can put an end date in the ordinance. After, I think it's 2027 or 28, that'll fall off, and then we just reallocate that amount.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Okay, so.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
I previously had read your email, and one of the questions I had was about the reduction for parks. Is that somehow being made up in some other way? Because it goes from 45 to 30, should we adopt the suggested? Do you know if that 15% is made up in some other way?
It wouldn't be.
Okay.
We can, like I said, we can play around with those percentages and get it back up to a level that you're all comfortable with. If you look, that 15% just goes basically straight to the bicentennial, so I would assume that once we're done with that, that 15% could just go back to the parks. But, yes, I mean, that's all negotiable.
Does anyone know how important the bed tax is to the parks? Is it a critical funding mechanism? Okay, thank you, Ms.
No,
Jackson.
we currently don't get any bed tax funding for the parks.
Okay. So, Mr. Milliken, on your suggestion, I'm just gonna use our current numbers that we know. So the 247, that's our money to play with. Destination has, is that include or doesn't include the 25 we still owe them?
So the analysis that was included in your packet, the number you actually want to be concentrating on is not the 247, but the 274. That's your ending fund balance as of when this was put together last week, minus the 25,000 for destination.
Okay.
So that's where, in my red box down there at the bottom, the adjusted fund balance, that's the 274 minus the 25. So you're looking at the 248, 369.07.
And I also want to be clear, because I think you might be misreading my suggestion. These numbers would not be percentage of the current fund balance.
That's what I wanted to clarify, yep.
Yeah, it would just be the annual revenue generated by the
So-
tax.
My first question to Ms. Jackson, how much do we spend, how much have we in recent years? I know the bed tax grant program seems to be dwindling some years and then it goes back up the next years. On average, what would you say our bed tax that we give away is?
25-ish.
25-ish. Could we give away more, or you think that's about right?
No, it's completely up to council what you give away. And honestly, we can adjust this anytime we do the budget. So we're going to be getting into, this is budget season now. So if you want to spend down part of that fund balance, we can again put that into next year's budget and do that as sort of a one-time thing to work that down on top of looking at this draft ordinance and putting that into place for future collections. Does that make sense?
Yes. Second question. The McGill Park Three Seasons room, that's going to be the pride and joy of all the community. The garage doors that we're delaying on, did we find out about how much those would be?
Yeah, I think Matt and Bill have that number, and I heard it once, and I only heard it once, and I don't recall what it was.
It's okay.
But it was,
I want to say it was at least six figures.
yeah.
Wow.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay, darn, I was like, if it's like 50,000, then let's buy the garage
Yes.
doors. Okay, well, so suggestion would be, what if we raise the bed tax grant for next year? And then we figure out what our annual would be. plus
What do you
a little-
mean raise the bed tax, like the
So
25?
normally we give away 25.
Oh, I know.
You don't wanna raise that?
No,
Yeah, I don't either.
no.
Okay.
We struggled trying to find, there were some applications on there, I'll be honest, I had a tough time. But we had the money, so I said, okay, we'll do it. But I'm like, this really isn't
What you would classify as worthy.
I just see
Okay.
other things. I kind of go back to the mayor, the value of what certain things do for the community. And I look at like the chamber, and I look at what the CWICC has done for our community, bringing about, close to $10 million in buildings with the wood buildings there. We've done $30,000 in grant money for facades that we did. Now, that was a direct grant from the city, not from bed tax or anything like that. But I'd like to look at the CWICC. We've talked about maybe doing the incubator thing with the CWICC. I think would be a pretty cool project that would bring a lot of value to this in generating, possibility of new wealth and new businesses coming into our community. And
So let's touch on that, because Groveport, just put those new buildings in, the
Yeah.
city built them.
Yeah.
And it's putting the finishing like straight to the wire.
$7.4 million of taxpayers' dollars. that
So
are
obviously, we don't
funding
have that much money, but if you, for the CWICC, potentially looking at those as incubator spots, can you play that out for us and tell us what a vision?
Well, I mean, I would think Lucas probably have more details than I've got, but just you would open up space, you'd bring some cubicle things and some shared space in, and then you'd try to draw people that, are looking to maybe create a product or do something in some sort of business type fashion and then go from there. I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert in, incubators, but I know communities do it, that their basic function is to spur, create new businesses that maybe don't quite have the wherewithal to get off the ground, but you help them. You bring in the Small Business Administration, some other programs, teach them how to put a budget together and things like that, and how to, promote their business. You could do some marketing classes and things like that, and then they launch, and then hopefully they get big enough that they need space somewhere else, and then you got another person maybe coming in.
So from the city side, what are the plans for finalizing that down there? I mean, are we right now?
Finalizing what?
The other half of the building?
Whenever the prices of stuff comes back down. And it's starting to ease down now, but it's still not at the level we think it should be. On the other hand, I think if there was money given to McGill Park for that building, and even though it may not fully fund it, at least it'd get us a lot closer to being able to then use money that we currently have and put the two together and finish it. But I'm like Amanda, I think it was over 100,000.
We haven't had discussions recently about it.
Okay.
We've had other things, many other projects, as I'm sure you're aware, going on, so.
Just a few.
So I've got another idea, going back to some of the concerns we had with giving the money to the chamber. But we also recognize that we do have a fund balance here with money that I think we would like to give away some of it to something. What if we did a one-time grant? And we were concerned about opening up that can of worms. Let's make it equitable, right? So if Historical Society wants to apply for a one-time grant of, I don't know what the figure everybody would be comfortable with, maybe it's 25,000, maybe it's 50,000, whatever, we can have a large grant program just one time, and we can choose which project we think would be most beneficial.
I really like that idea of sort of an annual floating allotment. I think that, and because I think in our previous council meeting, someone came up with, are we setting precedents? What do you do with the next new organization that wants a piece of this? And so if you had that annual floating amount, it's up for grabs. Anybody could come in and, I don't know if apply is the right word, but they could petition for that floating dollar amount.
Yeah. And we don't even have to have it every year. I mean, if that fund balance starts to dip where we're not comfortable with it, we can choose not to do it that year.
Sure, absolutely.
So what would you think dollar-wise that grant would look like? Like
For me, I would say 50.
50,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other? Because that's, if you want to go forward with that, I mean, that's what we got to figure out.
For a one, who would come and apply?
I don't know.
You brought up historical, what else?
Let's see. I mean, if nobody applies, or
Are
if
you
we
got
get,
in some government agencies, like if Lucas wanted to propose
I mean, if it's legal,
the-
sure. I mean,
Was this the one you said has to be a nonprofit? Does it have to be a nonprofit?
So bed tax, the way it's currently written, has to be a
Be
nonprofit.
nonprofit,
If we create
okay.
this new $20,000 or $50,000 grant, 25,000, whatever we end up deciding on, if we do this, then we can take our current bed tax and manipulate it a little bit to make it.
So are we talking about raising the grant from 25 to 50, or are we talking about a one-time floating grant of 50 grand?
Yeah, we would keep the 25 grant and then have a separate one-time.
Just to spend these down.
Yeah.
Okay.
So out of the 247, we have no bed tax grant money pending that's still out there. Okay, so we have $248,000. How much do we want to spend down before the end of the year?
50.
My thoughts would be 125, which would still leave you with plenty of money. You would still have over
I mean,
150,000.
it would all depend on what the projects are for me. I
Well,
mean,
this
that's
is where I
probably-
think we look at that chart that Chuck, what we referred back to on that May. This is where I think we go back to, I've lost it, there it
Yeah.
is. Where we look and say, okay, we have 125,000. We're going to do a $25,000 or $50,000 special grant to one project organization, and then the remainder will go 10%, 10%.
But that's for the annual
Or-
revenue. That's not for the current fund balance.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, if we
You're
wanted to
saying
go
at the
ahead.
one time, do the
Oh.
120,
At
do
one
a
time, we're gonna go ahead and give
125
them
down to all those groups.
Because the mayor's saying that it could potentially help our park situation, which is equitable to all of our community, the park is. You know, there's access, you know, they're having the CWICC, that is a project-driven, which brings revenue into the city. There are, you know, I think there's just, with the 100-year celebration, I think that's, you know, it's a
And
way
that'll
for us to go ahead and make that,
pay,
spend
yeah.
out some of that money,
Right.
and then next year we can.
That basically will get held. You just allocate that, but it still gets held because nobody's spending bicentennial money right now, or.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Can I throw a quick wrench into your discussion?
Oh,
Please
man.
do.
You were talking about the Historical Society. I would like to remind you that you actually have an agreement with the Historical Society where the city gives them $10,000 every year already. So I think when we wrote up this draft ordinance, the intention was that whatever bed tax money council may choose to give them would replace that $10,000. I will tell you that agreement is up at the end of this year, and they do have the intention of coming to you and asking you for even more.
So with that being said, the draft ordinance that you proposed, do you feel that that 10% is still adequate for them?
I don't know what they're going to propose. I was just told by two different individuals involved in it that the Historical Society is going to be looking for more money from us.
When did you say that's up?
The end of this year.
The end of this year?
Yes. So that's something that'll be coming to you in the next month or so.
So just for clarification, we give them $10,000 per year plus bed tax money currently?
We don't give them any bed tax money currently unless they were to apply for it through the bed tax grant program.
The 10,000 pays for the utilities on the
Correct.
Yeah.
historical complex.
And the 10,000 is just out of general fund, right? It's not the bed tax money? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's going to be an either or an add. It'll be, if we were to renew that $10,000 at the end of this year, beginning of January, what's on the table would be that 10 grand plus part of the bed tax, or one or the other?
That would be completely up to council how
Okay.
you want to do that.
And I don't want to hold up the discussion on the Historical Society, but if we focus in on what we want to do here tonight with the bed tax, and whatever we move forward with, we can always pass a resolution to edit that, right? I mean, if we pass something, a bed tax ordinance in November, and then Historical Society comes to us and asks for money, you know, we can revisit what we did here and make adjustments if needed.
Right. That's why I think if you kept back some money, you know, from out of this 274, it would maybe help you fund that, or maybe a little more, you know, for the historical type of thing that comes along that you really want to support. Right.
What I would suggest, Mr. Milliken, in that case, is not necessarily revisiting this ordinance every time. This will become a codified ordinance. Okay, so what I would suggest is you feel pretty confident in what you're doing here, and then if you want to give an organization something above and beyond this, we do that on a year-by-year basis when we do the budget. Otherwise, we're going to continually rewrite our codified ordinance every time somebody comes
So
to you, and we would like to not do
I
that.
guess, all right, so scenario, we pass an ordinance for the bed tax, allocating certain funds, that becomes codified. But we still have money in the fund balance. And we wanted to allocate more money, it's just another ordinance that we have passed?
It would just be a separate
A s-
thing, yeah, yep.
So that's, I mean, I guess,
Because that would be a one-time thing, like you were saying,
Yeah.
correct? Or in the case, let's say the Historical Society comes to you with an agreement, and you included them in here, we just write in that agreement, you're gonna get X number of dollars on top of what you're getting from the bed tax.
and so, say that we put in, 10% for Chamber of Commerce, but after a year, they're still kind of not really making any progress. We can, like I said, we can edit that out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I just don't want to be doing it
Gotcha.
multiple times a year. That makes sense.
And that's what I was gonna say, if you're gonna do a grant, from council or from the bed tax or whatever, then it's just like we do the grants for the scholarships. We do it once a year. We don't do it all year long. So I think that's what you need to do with this.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that that's something we play around with constantly. I just think that in certain circumstances, like I said, if, Chamber's not performing, and we have to make that change, or, the fund balance dips too low, I think they're rare situations that we would make adjustments, but I think that rightly so, we reserve that right to do so.
I think there's legal ways you could do that.
Yeah.
And obviously, we don't have our law director this evening, but I can talk to him about this. Perhaps putting in there that you have individual agreements with all of these organizations that you're allocating money to, and should they, and somewhere in that agreement, it says, should they not basically hold up their end of the deal, that money will no longer be theirs. Does that make sense? I'm sure there's a more eloquent way to put that into the codified ordinances, but
Does everybody like that?
Yeah,
I do.
Okay.
yeah.
So, my goal tonight would be to move forward with something ordinance-wise to pass. Would that be everybody else's?
So-
Not to pass, but to move to council. Do we want to try and hammer this out?
I do.
Okay.
I mean, we'd have, so here's just 2 seconds of thoughts that I wrote down. So let's say we spend out 125,000 this year. And then 25,000 towards your special grant, 50,000 towards the park, which would be close to 30 to 40% of making that Three Seasons room even more better. 15,000 to CWICC, and then 35,000 to the 100-year, because it's an all-year thing that the city is doing. And really, we're going to be attracting people back into our town. And that's the point of the bed tax. So that spends down, and then you look at our current allocations on here. I can't, obviously, I'm on the historical board, so I can't speak about it right now. But I would say like,
So what was the last one?
last one, 35,000.
To
your-
bicentennial.
To your bicentennial year.
So 25 to the grant, 10 McGill, 15,
50 to McGill.
50 to McGill. Oh, I
Because they
can't
said
read my
it's
own
gonna be-
writing.
And then 15 to CWICC, and
And 15.
35 to allow the mayor to really make the 100-year celebration fun. And then when you look at your bed tax grant, I think that you stick with a lot of the numbers that you have. You're going to have the 25,000 to the bed tax program, and I totally understand Mr. Clark's point on it, so I'm okay with that. You do 10% to the CWICC, you do parks to the park, parks to the Blues and Red Fest. The Historical Society would be your call if they're going to be coming back to ask for more money. I don't know that you put it in here right now, but your call.
I think we'd want to support that, probably. I mean, would be my guess. I don't.
All right, so I
that's it.
think that the two conflicting proposals So Jill is making the suggestion of paying it down more and giving lump sums to certain groups. Correct me if I'm,
To those 4
yeah.
units to
And then
spend
the
down.
other idea was the one-time grant that's a smaller pay down.
So I would, yeah, mine would be a smaller grant, so 25,000 would be my smaller
Yeah,
grant.
but what I'm saying is you're proposing spending more out of the current fund balance, 125, right?
So out
Is
of
what
the
you said.
248, I would spend down 125.
Yeah, so 125,
Because you still have 6 months of income from the bed tax that hasn't been collected yet
yeah.
for this year. So it's going to be back up again by the end of.
So it still leaves you with 123.
So it leaves you with 123. That's still a good rainy day fund.
Yeah.
And then.
And
we
if
go ahead and-
historical comes in, still gives you right
Still
from
gives you some money to play around, but
leeway
then
there.
we can go ahead and implement the ordinance that was proposed,
Hmm.
because I think all of us agree that the items on
What,
it are.
that's where I'm drawing a little bit of a, so are you talking about, then they would just kick in at that point for the current year money? So the 10% you're given to.
Yeah, so we're
that stuff.
not on this yet. She was trying to get to, I think
So I'm doing
we
two
hold
different
off on
things.
that
Yeah, I'm
for
just
now.
trying to get to
Yeah,
an end
so
balance,
right-
an end, yeah.
So I'm spending down and then I'm
Okay.
creating the ordinance so we don't have to revisit this conversation.
Okay, so the balance wouldn't go any lower than 123 by the other people getting all that money
Right.
right there. It just, that's your current money that's coming in.
It's a one-time pay down.
Correct. And then by the end of the year,
See,
you will
that's
be,
confused me, one-time pay down.
the 125 would be a one-time payout to reduce it down to the
Okay,
140
yes,
that
to
you
those,
said.
yeah, okay.
Correct. And then the 123 that would be remaining in the bank would have nothing spent out of it unless we
Okay.
made a special accommodation.
Okay.
It would be back up to close to 2 by the
Okay.
end of the year.
So where does that,
Close-ish.
Amanda, I know this is very difficult to follow, but then where does that leave
I got
us?
on board.
Where does that leave us? And I think I'm okay with it, but where does that leave us then with what money do you think of the value? Let's say, just take last year's figures of the bed tax, and what does that give to each group, so to speak? With let's go with Chuck. Does she have your numbers?
She doesn't know.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, I can forward this to her real quick.
Or you could just, she could write them out.
Okay, so my suggested plan was 10% to the Historical Society, 10% to CWICC, 10% to CWJRD, 10% to the Chamber, 15% to Labor Day, 15% to the Bicentennial, and 30% to Parks.
It's not bad. Can you read it one more time slower?
Yeah.
Sorry.
10% to the Historical Society, 10% CWICC,
Okay.
10% CWJRD, 10% to the Chamber, 15% to Labor Day, 15% to the Bicentennial, and 30% to the Parks.
Speaking from the JRD side, could we make it towards would anybody be opposed if we allocated that? Or Ms. Jackson can tell me if it's a no-go. If they allocated that to scholarship specific versus operating funds? Or would that be a no-go?
I think they could do whatever they want, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they can pretty much do whatever they want. Once it leaves our hands, unless council has a specific agreement with them on what they can and cannot use it for, then, I mean, I guess it's up to them what they want to do with it.
So, I mean, as the JRD rep, I would love for it to either go to our scholarship or be allocated to new programming, to gearing towards new programs, because really we want to make sure it's the future of the JRD that's growing. So.
I'm okay with that.
Sounds like it'd be your call. I mean, you have the.
Yeah,
freedom there.
if we make it specific, then we can, I hate to pigeonhole my own self, but I also think that at least then it's geared towards where we want to get to with the JRD.
How are the scholarships funded now?
So currently, we get a grant from the city. It's almost exhausted. Actually, I think it is exhausted. So we are going to be asking we're asking churches, some of the churches right now to help fund it, just to get us through to the next bed tax grant. But the students apply through Human Services, so that.
We're just the administrator, though, that's all
Yeah,
we
you're
do.
just the administrator, but it makes it very neutral for the parties.
Sure.
You're Human Services knows the groups.
But the dollars
families.
themselves come from the city.
It comes from the bed tax grant.
Okay.
And then we've done some other fundraising along the way, but.
All right. Let's table that for the moment.
Okay.
I think we need to try and keep this on task here. So I think what we need to figure out currently, our next item is how much we want to spend down the current fund balance.
Well, I still need to answer my question to get can you do the 10, if you did the last year's funding, 10, 10, 10, 10, 15, 15, and 30, what each one of those would be?
So 10% of council's portion, now, let me ask this question while I do this math real fast, are you intending to keep the $25,000 for the bed tax program?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so you're looking at 10% being about $5,000.
Okay?
So
So 15 is like 7,000.
it's 7,800, yep.
7,800.
These are rounded numbers, so.
Okay, that's cool.
And then your 30% is going to be between 15 and 16,000. So, some of them, it's not a ton of money, but it's something.
It's something.
35.
I like your breakdown, Chuck.
Thank you.
I think it's equitable. I think that it touches a lot of the groups that have the equity in the town, in our city.
Yeah, I'm fine with his suggestion.
What happens if you have another 501c3 or 501 whatever? It's a new one. It comes to you, they what?
Well, I think that'd be one of those rare circumstances, like I've mentioned, we would edit the ordinance as needed.
Could we allocate 5% to other? And then if other materializes, great. If other doesn't materialize, then it just goes into the regular fund.
Okay?
But if we don't add that in, we still have the option to make a donation to them out of our fund anyway, right?
Yeah.
But it requires legislation to do that?
Depends on what's included in the budget.
Yeah, just trying to make it
Because the
easy.
budget isn't, when I present you the budget isn't going to say specifically that X number of dollars is going to this organization and X is going to this organization. It's going to say in our operating expenses, we're going to spend $50,000. So if in reality you spend $45,000, we already have $5,000 already budgeted that you could then just direct me through a resolution to distribute to somebody. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's dependent.
Are we able, when we write this, not me, obviously, when you guys write the ordinance, are you able to put in there with the allocations that Mr. Milliken provided, that the bicentennial for the year only, so it'd be specific to a year only?
Meaning it's only funded through a certain year?
Correct.
Oh, I would think so,
Okay.
yes.
And then would we need to list where it would be reallocated on the same ordinance, or would we go
Probably, I mean, that would be cleanest.
Okay.
So back to the pay down amount. How much do we want to pay down the fund balance?
My suggestion's 125.
125.
Obviously, open to suggestions.
I think that's reasonable.
125,
I'm all right
Mr.
with
Clark?
that. I'm all right
Mr.
with that.
Busker? Mr. Walker? One. Okay. All right, so 125. Now, the second question for that 125, do you want to do a one-time grant? Or do you want to do a grant with Ms. Amos' suggestions with, I think, 50 to McGill, 15 to CWICC, 35 to the bicentennial, 25 to the grant? Want to break
But
it
those
down?
were one-time
That's a
paid out.
one-time,
Right.
that's the one-time payment of 125,000.
I'm okay with the one-time,
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are worthy
Again.
groups, I think.
Okay.
Mr.
All right.
Milliken,
Yes.
can we ask council to consider something?
Yeah.
You know, some of the internal discussions we've had about the bicentennial celebration and what we would like to see is probably going to be quite expensive. My personal ask would be that council considers giving the 30% to the bicentennial and the 15 to the park. And then perhaps after the bicentennial, we could flip-flop it back to the 30% to the park.
That would be
Or
clean,
you could
as
just
you'd say.
combine it all to parks at that point, because your bicentennial's
Well, that
over.
part I'll leave up to council, but I think that we're gonna need some funds for the
Yeah.
bicentennial, and, you know, our parks have operated without this funding for
So-
all these years. I think we can wait a couple more. Just a
Yeah, I like
suggestion.
that of flipping them, and then that way, when it expires, it just reverts right back. It's nice and clean. I also think too, if, that being said, I say we just take the 25,000 that Mrs. Amos suggested for the grant and just add that to the bicentennial.
So we're not doing-
I would say not do the grant then, and just, instead of 35 to the bicentennial, make it 60. That would be, that's just my suggestion. Because the whole idea behind that suggestion of that one-time grant was that we weren't going to be spending all this other money. It was going to be a smaller pay down amount.
So where are you taking, what's
So-
getting axed?
So that,
So the grant that he suggested that would be, that anybody could apply for, he's saying kill that, add it to the 100 years so that we
Okay.
can continue to celebrate.
Okay,
So that makes it 50 for the park,
no,
15 for CWS.
this is separate from the
This is the spend
regular
down.
grant.
okay, all
So
right.
spend down would be 125, equating to 50 for the park, 15 for CWICC, and 60 for the bicentennial.
Yeah.
Then going forward for the ordinance, 10 for CWHS, 10 for CWICC, 10 for CWJRD, 10 for the chamber, 15% for Labor Day. For 2023, 30% to the bicentennial, 15% to the parks. Lori had mentioned the 5%, so we just need to figure out which item is going to be 5% less. And maybe it's 10% for the parks, and then the following year it would be 40%. I don't have a calculator handy.
as long as we feel good that the parks are well enough funded through other grants and whatnot, as long as that
And as soon as 2023 ends, then the 40% would go
go
to
back
the
to,
parks.
yeah.
If you're going to take 5 away, I would take it from Labor Day.
And where are you putting it again?
That's going to be in your other.
Have that
In
5%
Oh, that
discretionary,
other-
yeah.
Right, okay.
To answer Mayor Ebert's question about
Right.
what if another
Right.
nonprofit comes forward.
Do we have a calculator on this?
I can do the math. Oh, yes, you should have a calculator on your computer. You may just have to search calculator.
Need my 10 key. Okay, that's 100. Okay. So we'll go let's do it one more time here. Spend down is 125,
Yep.
equating to 50 for the park,
Mm-hmm.
15 for CWICC,
Mhm.
60 for the bicentennial.
Yep.
And then the ordinance for the bed tax would be 10% to CWAHS, 10% to CWICC, 10% to CWJRD, 10% to the chamber, 10% to Labor Day. For year 2023, 30% to bicentennial, 15% to park, 5 for discretionary. And then after year 2023, it would be 45% towards the parks unless we modified it at that point.
No, it's,
Mayor,
did she say?
when would you want the bicentennial funding to expire? In 27 or 28? I know you'd mentioned that.
Probably 28 would be my guess. I mean, it depends on, it could depend on how much bed tax we're taking in now. Maybe we're taking in $2 million. That'd be great.
Yeah.
If that happens, it could expire before that. But at the basic same rate you're going right now, it's got to go through 2028.
Okay. So that'll be in the ordinance as well then, the expiration of the bicentennial amount in 2028. And at that point, it just reverts back with the parks, right?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So then the parks becomes 30 or the parks becomes
45?
45,
Got it, okay.
yeah. And so on top of that, as well, the individual agreements that you mentioned.
Yep.
Does that make sense to everyone? Everybody on board?
And those individual agreements will kind of lay out what they hope to accomplish with the money that they're being allocated.
Yeah.
When would council like to do the spend down of the fund balance? Is that something you want to accomplish in 2022, or do you want it in the 2023 budget?
I mean, I'd like to see it in 2022, but you tell us what we can do, because you're the one that has to deal with it.
No, we can do it in 2022, I just need to prepare legislation, so.
Can you do it in 22, but if somebody doesn't quite get, that, can they come in 2023, like early part of, because I'm just thinking like with CWICC, you know, it might be a little while before Lucas gets some sort of program together that we could, you know, do the incubator thing and stuff like that. So he might not, I mean, if he's gonna, we don't want to lose that and rush something. So I'm saying, just can we carry that over and just,
So you're saying you don't want to give them the 15,000 until they have a project to spend it on, or?
Does it have to
Is
be
that what I'm hearing?
expended in 2022? Or
Yeah.
can it roll over into 2023?
yeah.
That, I
It'll-
mean, as far as when the organization that we're giving the money to can spend it, that's up to council. Once
Okay,
once
just
I write a
let-
check.
I just wanted to make sure, allow that leeway to go over to the next year if somebody, because, you know, we're getting, instead of
Right.
rushing somebody that, oh, I gotta get, you know, it's
Right.
use it or lose it type of thing, and then they rush something, so.
Well, and I think the incubator idea is good, and I know that members of the city staff had mentioned that, and I'd love to see it happen.
That was in the article for Groveport. I read an article just today. They're talking about doing that on the second floor of their new buildings.
Using some
I
of
just
their-
think it's a fabulous idea.
So I will make it my goal to try and have this by next week. I know that Mr. Boggs has a lot on his plate at the moment, so him and I may not be able to finish that, but we should have it by the second meeting in September at the latest, so.
Okay,
Thanks for your quick math over there.
yeah. Good work.
Okay.
Um,
After 2.5 years.
Motion
All
to
right, so we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Motion was made by Ms. Amos, second by Mr. Clark. Roll call.
Miss Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Miss Amick?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Timeout 6:57.
Well done, everyone.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah. it's a
Discussion?
World record, I think.